but does it fall down enough?
Right. Right. Hey, I'm going to call to order the Lexington Planning Commission meeting on June 26, 2025. And the first order on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Has everybody had a chance to look at it? And are any changes needed, requested? Then I'll take a motion in a second.
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? And the motion carries. Next item of on the agenda is approval of minutes. We do not have minutes for last meeting this week, so we'll skip on down to citizens' comments on matters that are not on the agenda. And would you like to come and comment on something that's not on the agenda? Okay, so I'll close that and move on to new business, which is Lexington Comprehensive Plan Update presentation by Jeremy Crute with the Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission. So come on up and state your name.
I could just give a quick overview. CSPDC, we're a member, and they also provide a number of additional services. They do these comp plan amendments, so they help with them. So we've partnered, there's a contract, and Jeremy will go over some of the pieces and parts to that. But that's what we've done is we've entered into a contract with the PDC to help us with this comp plan update.
And it's a pleasure to be with you this evening. Once again, I'm Jeremy Crute, Director of Planning with the Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission. I'll touch on a little bit more on some of the things that Arnie was talking about just now in terms of, introducing you to us and who we are and what we do and the way we'll be trying to help support this effort. But as he mentioned, I'm here because the city asked us to help lead and facilitate. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to remember to talk into this, to lead and facilitate your efforts to update the city's comprehensive plan. And so I'm very excited to be working with you over the next several months in order to do that. And tonight, just to kickstart that process, we wanted to do three things. One, just to set the stage, wanted to do a crash course in Comprehensive Planning 101, even for whether or not you're an expert or a first time in being involved in one of these, it's always good to set that stage to make sure we're all starting from the same place in terms of what it is, why it matters, and how it can benefit the city. Second, I just wanted to outline what that process is going to look like, and how y'all can be involved in helping to guide and shape that process, timeline, next steps, etc. And then third, and most importantly, just wanted to give you an opportunity to offer any guidance or direction for us as we're getting started with this process, because ultimately this is your and the city's comprehensive plan. We want to make sure that our work on it reflects your goals, your vision for the city, etc. So I'm going to quickly walk through all of that with you tonight. But first, just by way of introduction, just wanted to give you a little bit more of a background as to who we are. Is it easiest to have something to click through slides, or is it easiest if I
Get the slides up by chance.
Oh, no worries if not. Oh,
Oh,
no worries.
okay.
I've got it. No. I do have a flash drive if that's helpful, but if I can, yeah, for sure. That's too much pain.
And everybody has a hard copy.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, you've got it. No, that's wonderful. So you can go ahead and flip to that second slide of who we are. So again, if you're not familiar, we're a regional planning agency that's established by the state to serve all of our member jurisdictions, which includes all of the cities, counties, and towns located in those 5 counties that you can see on that map. And we just exist to provide planning services and technical assistance to our localities across a wide array of issues, from community development, housing, transportation, you name it, we probably do a little bit of it. And we do that through a variety of ways of writing and administering grants, conducting transportation studies, and just to I guess to name a few, and obviously comp plan updates is one of those things that we often try to help with as well. So again, bottom line, we're just here to serve our member localities, and excited to continue to do that with you this evening. So you can go ahead and flip to the next slide. So transitioning to thinking about your comp plan, just to make sure, again, that we're all on the same page, wanted to start by talking about what a comp plan is. And again, because even if you are very familiar with and or been involved in comp plan updates before, I still find that it's very helpful to start by going through this exercise just to ground us in why a comprehensive plan is important and why it's worth spending all of this time and effort on. And I heard someone say relatively recently that comp plan is a tangible representation of your community's desired future. And I really like that because I think in any profession, but especially in community development, it can be really, really important to periodically take a step back to look at the big picture of where we are now and where we'd like to go. Because often I think we get so caught up in the nitty-gritty details of individual projects that we lose sight of what we're ultimately building and moving towards. And so by taking the time, take that step back to create a collaborative vision for what we want Lexington to be like in 25 years, we can make sure that all of those nitty-gritty decisions are aligned and moving toward a common goal and a common vision for the city. And so that's ultimately what the comp plan is for and what the comp plan does. And that's what that tiny little diagram is trying to get to illustrate and to get at. Because by taking the time to detailing where we are today, outlining our existing conditions, identifying needs, then creating tangible goals for how we or where we want to be 25 years from now, and then identifying specific steps for how do we get there and how do we achieve those goals. And by the end of all of that, hopefully we will have a plan that can serve as that north arrow for all your decisions moving forward over the next 5, 10, 25 years. And you can go ahead and flip to the next one. So we already touched on a lot of this, but I guess just to be a little bit more specific or a little bit more technical, a comp plan is an official document that's adopted by the city that lays out a long-range vision for all aspects of the city's physical development in a way that reflects the community's goals and desires that can then be used to guide and inform your decision-making moving forward. And you can go ahead and flip to the next. Because I think in addition to defining what a comp plan is, it's often useful to recognize what a comp plan is not, because comp plans are not regulations. They're not land use codes. They're not your zoning ordinances. Comp plans are ultimately advisory only, in that it can serve to guide how you implement your zoning ordinance. It can guide and inform how you update your zoning codes over time, but it does not directly determine what can or cannot be done with a specific piece of property. And then, of course, I guess that last one, we hope that the plan won't end up being a dust collector in terms of it. We will be one that you want to refer back to, that you want to pick up when you're reviewing a rezoning or a permit or the like. So you can go ahead and flip again. So now that we know what a comp plan is, the next question is just why we have one at all. And again, the most pragmatic reason for that is simply that it's required by the state. Virginia code requires that every municipality have a comprehensive plan and requires that it updates it every 5 years. And since Lexington's comp plan was last fully updated back in 2020, it's time to revisit the plan. I know there have been some amendments in the interim, but the last full update was back in 2020. You can go ahead and flip again, but I think we've already touched on this, but the second reason why we have a comp plan is because it allows us to practically plan for the future, inventorying assets, anticipating needs, setting goals, guiding decision-making, et cetera. But I wanted to also just touch on that last point, which is that comp plans can also help strengthen grant applications. As an example, if you'd like to put a sidewalk on a particular street, if you can point to your comp plan that shows that we have identified this as a community need and it's a project that has been, we've thought about and we think is very important to the long-term vitality of our community, that really helps to strengthen your grant applications if you'd like to get funding to build that sidewalk, that kind of thing. You can go ahead and flip again. So what's included in the comp plan? So comp plans are by nature comprehensive, and they all, because of that, they address all aspects of the community's physical development. This list is the elements that are included in your current comprehensive plan. And most of those are either required or recommended by the state code. But the cool thing is that while the state code will say you have to address these elements, it gives you a lot of flexibility as to how you address those elements, because so we ultimately have a lot of freedom for addressing them in a way that makes the most sense for the city of Lexington, because obviously economic development looks a whole lot different in Lexington than it would in Alexandria or Richmond. And so it gives us the freedom to create the plan that would most benefit our context and our community. Which, as a side note, is sort of why your involvement in this process and why the community engagement process that I'll touch on in a minute is so important, just to make sure that every chapter and every goal is uniquely tailored to what's best for the city of Lexington. And again, not just for some other community. There's an asterisk there by transportation, just because the transportation chapter is a little bit more involved and has stricter requirements than the rest of the plan. Most notably, it's the only chapter in which you'll be required to identify specific projects in addition to just broader goals. So instead of just saying, we would like safer roadways, you have to say things like, we will make intersection improvements to this intersection, or put a sidewalk on this street. So it takes it that one step farther than at least we're required. You have the option to do that for all the other chapters, but it's the only one where it's a required meant to do that. And then in addition to that, the transportation chapter is the only chapter that has to undergo review by the state. So once we draft that chapter, we'll have to send it to VDOT. They'll have 90 days to review it and just to make sure that we've checked all the boxes of all the requirements of the data and information that we're required to include for that chapter. You can go ahead and then flip to the next one. So for each of the elements that were listed on the previous slide, we'll follow the same process of fact-finding, goal setting, and then implementation, through which we hope to answer the 4 key questions of, again, where we are now, where we're going, where do we want to be, and how we're going to get there. So just as an example, for the economy chapter, we'll do a deep dive into the data to detail Lexington's economic conditions. We'll look at all the types of businesses and industries are located in the city, what kind of jobs are available, how this impacts wages for residents. Is the economy growing? Are we seeing any statewide trends or countywide trends that are impacting Lexington's economy? And then once we've completed that analysis, we'll then use that information to outline those goals and objectives and strategies for how to help Lexington's economy and community thrive. And I'll also, the most important thing maybe to note is in our case, in going through all that process, our job is going to be a whole lot easier because you already have a great plan in place from back in 2020. And so instead of starting from scratch, this process will simply be more of updating and refining your current comp plan rather than going through the process of completely reinventing the wheel. So this will be much more of a, I guess you could say, a light update to your process, to your comprehensive plan, because it already is in good shape. From what I understand, it still does a great job of representing the direction and the values of the community. And so because of that, it will be a much lighter touch than, say, other communities that we work with, where we're basically rewriting the whole plan from scratch. You can go ahead and flip to the next one. So I guess more specifically on what this process will look like and who will be responsible for what. The PDC will do a lot of the heavy lifting on collecting the data, mapping the data, making revisions to the text, ensuring that we're meeting state code. And then we'll be working closely with city staff to facilitate some of the public engagement process, which will at a minimum include a survey and 2 public engagement meetings at different points throughout the process. And then we would love for you all to be involved by making sure that we get it right. So when we draft a section, we'll send it to you, and we'd love your review and feedback on it. Just making sure that, or adding all of your local knowledge and understanding of the community and understanding of the planning landscape and bringing that to bear on the plan. So how that typically works is in advance of your planning commission meetings, we'll send you a couple of the chapters, at least as drafted, for your review and feedback. And then I will come and present those chapters at the meeting, walking through what is in the chapter, what the data says, how it's changed, or how we've updated it since the previous one. And then, leading in a discussion of any other changes or additions or the like that you'd like to see it made. Again, ultimately making sure that our draft of the plan is getting it right in terms of representing the community in the direction you'd like to go. Normally, when we do this for other communities, we usually do roughly 1 chapter a month for a closer to a year-long process. But in y'all's case, again, since it'll be that lighter update, we'll probably be aiming to do a couple chapters a month, which hopefully trying to finish up this process by the end of the year. And I think that about wraps it up in terms of my slides and presentations for the day. But again, really appreciate your time and attention this evening, and really looking forward to working with you moving forward over the coming year. And I'm happy to answer any questions, happy to have a discussion about if you have ideas already as to directions you'd like it to go, or tweaks or things, or even elements of the plan that you'd really like us to pay close attention to as we're getting into this process. Love to hear any feedback like that you may have. But yeah, eager to hear any thoughts, ideas, or questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you so much. That was very helpful. I do have one quick question, and that is about the goals. Do you all work on creating measurable goals?
Mhm.
Okay, and
Yeah.
so how do you put that into the plan? How do you sort of say, okay, future planning commission members, this is how you're going to measure whether you have met those goals? Because we've been sort of doing that over the course of the last several months, looking to see if we've even started various projects.
Sure.
But the question has come up a number of times of, okay, so we've started, does that mean that we're not actually, going to look at that anymore? We want to make sure that we're still incorporating the things that we care about, and we're not just like, oh, well, that's done.
For sure.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So is that something like, how do you incorporate that into the planning process?
It's a great question, and I think it's a big part of the importance of crafting those goals and objectives and strategies as you go
Mhm.
along, because you're definitely right that it is very easy to craft a goal that you either can't measure, and oftentimes goals are so overarching and so broad and vague that it's sort of hard to say, have we made, have we helped the city of Lexington's like economy thrive, and what does that mean? And so I think oftentimes in the way a lot of plans work is the measurability of it will come into play more with the objectives and the goals themselves.
Sure.
Sometimes those goals are so overarching
Mhm.
that it is almost impossible to measure, or would need some sort of multi-factor analysis in order to measure it.
Right.
And so oftentimes the objectives and or the strategies is where that really comes into play, of trying to make sure we are crafting the language of those objectives in a way that can be measured or can
Mhm.
be looked at. But I think that's it. Especially if that's something that's sort of very important to trying to take the plan as it is to the next step. If that's a section that you'd like to, or not even a section, but like an element that you'd like to be incorporated throughout it, we can certainly incorporate that idea of even having, metrics for each of the goals, or associated metrics associated with each of the objectives, in order to give you all an easy place of being able to track how that has gone over time.
Yeah, I think that would be quite helpful, in part because we don't want it to just be a dust collector,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And in order to make it functional, we need to know how to implement, or at least have some guidance on how to implement. So that would be great.
And I guess to that point, would it be helpful and I guess maybe more acceptable, maybe a better word for that, to focus primarily on like metrics for each objective or each strategy or something like that instead of the overarching goals? Would
Yes.
that sound okay?
I mean, my understanding is that goals are up here, and then you have objectives, and then you have strategies, right? So it's really those strategies
Yeah.
that you want the metrics for,
Sure.
so that you can, and then if you get enough of those, then you're like, okay, I've met that objective.
For sure.
Right.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have thoughts or questions?
So it says that there will be one community engagement session. Is that at the beginning of the process or at the end of the process?
So the way we often like to do it is that we'll have two, one near the beginning to try to get that community, as much community input at
Yeah.
early on, so that can then inform all of the chapters. Because it just will, the way we often try to do it, and this is, hasn't been figured out yet, but we'll have some sort of open house. We'll have different stations related to each of the different types, like a transportation station, a land use station, economy station, that kind of thing, where people can provide input on that specific element of the plan. And so we'll like to do that as early on in the process as we can, so that as we go through the process of updating each of them, we can incorporate that feedback into it. And then on the back end, once the plan is either completely drafted or mostly drafted, we like to have one near the end to sort of present the plan as drafted, again, to make sure we got it right, to make sure that there isn't anything that we missed, anything that we should have added, any ideas that have percolated in the few months through which we started doing it. So that is normally how we like to do it, sort of bookending the process as much as possible,
Right.
one at the beginning and one near the end.
Okay.
This just says one, though.
Did I put that on the slide?
Yeah.
That's probably
Okay. Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
That's right. We're going to hold you to it.
That's perfect.
They
Yeah,
clarify,
please.
in the contract, it says three.
I'm sorry.
Oh, excellent.
Reason for that is, I think a standard was the one,
Mhm.
and then we actually asked and are paying for more, so that, because we knew our citizen area is engaged, and therefore we're actually having three.
Good.
That's great. Yeah.
That's in
Yeah,
addition
even
to
better.
what the public hearing, the public adoption process is.
Absolutely.
Great. Do you have sort of a sense of a timeline of when that first meeting can be held? I know you all are going to have some time to prepare.
Absolutely. My initial thought would be sometime June, like late July or like mid to late July would probably be an acceptable time. If that works for you all, that would sort of give us enough time to get prepared for it. And again, try to have it early enough in the process that can inform the rest of the
Right.
plan. But
Yeah, that would
yeah.
be really helpful.
For sure.
And at what point do you and how do you want to receive comments from the Planning Commission about,
Yeah.
items that we particularly are,
Sure.
sort of thinking about and that are upcoming? I'm just thinking about entrance corridors and, whether that's not necessarily something, but maybe it is something that you all could help us sort of put into the plan. And I know that we have sort of a hit list of other things that we're interested in. Maybe Arnie could provide you with that list.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every community does it a little bit differently. Just to
Okay.
some degree, I'll defer to you all and to RNA as to how best you'd like to handle that. I'm, very open to give you my contact information and send me some of that directly, or if it's more helpful to get that funneled through you. In whatever way, I'm happy to do that. But I also will be trying to be here or like each month to give you a chance to provide that type of feedback,
Okay.
as well as getting to work through each chapter with you. But do you have a preference as to how that should work best, or?
If you just funnel it through me and I'll provide that, but it's a good point because in addition to a thumb drive that I gave Jeremy just a little bit ago with all of the plans that they had asked for, also all of the the existing comp plan, the InDesign files, all the data that's in there, he has that. But one thing I forgot to do is what you've been working on recently, which are your chapter strategies, your implementation chapter charts for each one of those. So I need to provide those as well. And then our to-do list is also a helpful thing to provide. So I'll do
Yeah,
that as well.
That'd be great. Thank you. So if we have things that if anybody has something that they want to say today, I think that that's fine. But if there are other things, so you're coming once a month. We meet twice a month. So you won't be at our next meeting. Is that correct? Or
I can if you really need me to. I guess I'll put it that way. But
Okay.
typically it would just be the once a month.
okay,
But,
that's fine. No, I just want to have a sense of whether we would have some time next
Yeah.
month to have prepared to, sort of think about what the issues are that we particularly.
Maybe we set some time on the July 24th is the second meeting. And if you want to have one or two chapters, maybe we set aside a little bit of time before or after that for a more sort of broader scope discussion. Doesn't have to be lengthy to get to the to-do list and the other things that may need to be specifically addressed. I'll give you perhaps two examples if I can think of the two. One is definitely that parcel that's off of Maple Lane that we talked about months ago. And then the citizens, the residents there came in and said, well, what about that property right behind us? So we've already made Jeremy aware that there's at least a question and that needs to be specifically addressed somehow, at least brought up. Maybe it doesn't change, maybe it does change. But that's one particular thing. And I'm going to blank on what the other thing was. Institutional creep.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be specifically defined or addressed, but I think that needs to be part of this conversation. When we're looking another 30 years down the road in this update, can we, if possible, it's going to be a hard thing, but just, I think that needs to be part of the conversation, however that actually happens during this update process. And then if you have any other, and we pass along the green infrastructure, the briefing note and the main doc. So they're going to have all that. They're going to go through all the data that's in the existing one and update that. So that's going to be a big lift on its own. They're going to go through the strategies and everything. So there will be a lot that needs to be accomplished. But again, the point is, and this is the direction that we've gotten from council, is this needs to be more of a light review because we did such a heavy lift, 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, to really get this in the shape that it's in. It's a major update.
And are you providing Jeremy with information about like the Healthy Green Neighborhoods group that's meeting? Just in terms of they're working on green infrastructure, it seems like anything in the threshold housing, all of the things that we're actually doing right now seem like they could. It's just seems like it would be helpful to know about those as a background. Like this is already happening. There's a lot of energy here, and
maybe that's a good part of the discussion on the 24th, in addition to the one or two chapters that we can discuss some of those things. As an example, I went looking because our two documents from the green infrastructure, there's still the briefing note and whatever the other one is called. They don't have that Healthy Green Neighborhoods moniker on them. I went to the the Rockbridge Conservation website, and I couldn't find anything other than the position description. So I couldn't really tell if they even had more than the briefing note. So this idea of the collective impact model and specifically this Healthy Green Neighborhoods effort, I'm going to need some help knowing where that is because I'm not on the committee.
Yeah, I will be able to help make sure that that's available.
That's a good point. Those bits and pieces that not, one of us is in control of all that. So
That's right.
to make PDC aware, that would be helpful.
So
Which on that, this is not, you don't have to answer this, more of a comment. I'll be interested in what y'all think about some aspects of our comprehensive plan. I mean, I think the text is great, but getting to what Shannon said on the strategies, they're very aspirational.
Mhm.
We have a lot of them and
Mhm.
yeah, they're not always measurable. So I'll
Mhm.
be interested if you have any feedback on, maybe we should pare some of them down. A lot of them, or not a lot, but again, with this conversation, not all of them are related to planning or under the city control. So, it's nice to have one document that sort of says all these things going on, but it does make it hard trying to figure out, are we really, what's going on with this? Like we just said, we don't always know what's going on. It's something we'd like to do. So I'll be interested in hearing your feedback on some of this. Maybe we should tweak a little bit of this or not.
that's a helpful lens for us to approach it with. So I appreciate that. That is very helpful.
Yeah, and I thank you for saying that. I think that that is critical. And just from our review, it's just sort of like, well, I don't know. Who's, we don't know who would even, some of the things, we don't even know who would be responsible for them. So I do think it's worth having that conversation about whether that belongs in the city's comprehensive plan.
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, I'm looking forward to this Does anybody else?
I just wanted to say one thing. When you're collecting data on Lexington, I assume, but are you also, we talked a lot about comparing us to other communities of our size and the whole institutional creep or town and gown communities and how to maybe get more residential downtown or the balance of retail versus offices, all these things that other communities have already addressed. I mean, are you looking at other communities besides ours to kind of compare that, or is that an option to do?
Yeah, when it comes to the data collection piece, obviously the vast majority of it will be for Lexington, but we usually then at a minimum would compare it to say the rest of Rockbridge County, just to see how the unique elements of that. In terms of, I think it's definitely one of the things that we can do as part of this process is take a look at other sort of aspirational or similar communities. I spent a lot of time in Tallahassee, Florida, that had 100,000 college students. So the town and gown element is definitely a big part of, at least I'm familiar with it as it relates to that. So we can certainly take a look to see if there are other aspirational or similar types of communities to be able to particularly pull, going back to strategies in terms of, what are some ideas that other communities are pursuing that might be worth at least bringing to the table for consideration moving forward. So it's definitely,
Communities have already dealt with that, and why start from scratch? Maybe that,
In our 5-county region, how many comp plan reviews do you all help with each year? Just to get, so that they will have good knowledge about 5 around here.
There was one point I was working on 5 at once. That was sort of the extreme, but normally it's 1 or 2 a year kind of thing. Yeah, for sure. There just so happened to be a lot that's happening all at one time.
So another sort of, this is a little bit of a larger issue, and may not be within the scope of our comprehensive plan, but since it's sort of related to the conversation we were having about the different jurisdictions, our entrance corridors, the boundary, particularly of the Route 60, but to an extent, the Route 11 as well, on the Route 11 north and 60 going east towards Richmond. The county area, the county line, it's like, okay, well, that's completely unrelated, except that it's just like a one strip. And I wonder if that's something that you all see in other communities, and if so, if you have any suggestions on how to, and maybe that's one of those things that might benefit from a multi-jurisdictional approach. And I don't know, that's really more of a question. So
I guess just to make sure I'm understanding, there's just not much space to work with in terms of like creating an entrance to the city. Is that kind of what you're saying?
it's just, it's more that, like, if we wanted to put sidewalks, for example, The sidewalk would end under the bridge, at the bridge. And then there would be no sidewalks in the county.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But
yeah,
it's
yeah.
really, there's a shopping district right beyond the bridge.
Mhm.
So that would be one, and a hotel just went in. Right. So on the other side, in the county side. So thinking about how to make those areas walkable for city residents, would be something that I think would be interesting to try and improve.
The high school's right there too. So,
The high school is
yeah.
a great example.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's,
there are
and that's
kids
Route
that
11.
technically could bike or walk if there was a safe way.
That's right. In fact, there's a guy who walks in front of my house every day, and I'm often seeing him. I live in town, right? So I often see him out at the entrance, almost at Walmart, walking,
Mhm.
and he does it all the time. And so now he's just one person. I just happen to recognize him because he walks in front of my house, right? But I think that if there were opportunities, and the high school is in fact, you have to walk on a divided highway if you were going to get there at all.
Yeah.
For both of those, if I may interject, we have a Route 60 corridor plan that was adopted by VDOT right when I got here in 2016. They've been working on it, but then the adoption actually happened, I think, in 2016. So that helps us at least provide maybe not so much entrance corridor design guidelines things, but certainly there's a 10-foot multi-use path that's on the south side that goes under the bridge. So we already have elements. We've tried to coordinate with the county with a smart scale application, and they actually went after one for the Route 11 corridor that was done more recently, that pedestrian corridor plan going up
yeah.
Route 11, and they didn't get money. So we haven't been able to sync up in the odd year cycles when we have smart scales thus far. But that's a good reminder. Got a note to send. You already have the Route 11 one,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
sure,
sure
but
do.
the Route
Yeah.
60 corridor plan, I'll make sure that you have a
That'd be
copy of
great.
that.
That's
So
great.
some of the elements are
Yeah.
been considered.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things, right? There's so much has been done, and talk about dust collecting, right? So it would be great to sort of dust those off and say, okay, how can we continue to use these in a way that we don't reinvent the wheel?
Mhm.
So,
And I guess another thought too, this is less common with comp plans, but certainly some of the economic development plans that we work on for any strategy that we identify. We'll also, I'd try to identify potential partners that might need to be involved in this
Mhm.
process. So say with the entrance corridors, county is the obvious other partner that might need to be involved in that, or, so it's oftentimes we'll have some sort of table or matrix that'll have the strategy, partners that need to be involved with it, metrics for measuring success with it.
Mhm.
And then, there's another one. Oh, like potential funding sources or things like that. So we can consider having something like that as well that might identify who those other partners that who need to be at the table to make some of those strategies happen, where multi-jurisdictional or those sorts of things might need to be in place. That's at least another option to consider.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? So thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. I look forward to working with you. Okay, I guess I'll open the floor to public comment. We have some members of the public here. Would either of you like to come up and make a statement about this particular issue? Comp plan? Nope. Okay, so I'm going to close public comment, and we'll go on to the next section of our agenda, which is other business zoning and planning report.
The only thing to mention, and I cannot recall if I had in a previous zoning and planning report, is we have new state legislation that's going to kick in on July 1st that limits how plats and site plans, they call them plans of development at the state level, but site plans can be reviewed and approved. And they're no longer going to be coming to you or council. They're going to be administrative because of legislation, again, at the state level that no longer allows us to take boundary line adjustment or a lot line vacation all the way to council. So that's something that we're going to have an adjustment for. So our attorney's office is already working on that subdivision ordinance amendment.
So we won't see site plans at all.
Yeah, and when you say that, what type of site plans?
site plans for if we had a Wawa coming in. We don't. But you know, so any new development, all of a sudden you need the site plan comes to you all typically. Spotswood.
Housing
No, yeah,
development.
that's what I was gonna ask. So
Spotswood.
Spotswood, that wouldn't have come to, right?
So now they're limited to the agent. And I'm the subdivision agent, so the agent ends up reviewing them with staff. It's not just me. So I'll send it around. And what we would normally do in that case is I would send it around to the design review team meeting. Planning, public works, fire, police. They would all review it and have comments, and then we'll see if it meets all the different requirements in the city. If it does, then we would have brought it to you all for a recommendation and then on to council. Actually, site plans only came to you all only. In the odd situation where it was part of a campus master plan, then it also went to council. So we're going to have to remove those items out of the subdivision and site plan section.
Mhm.
So
Would it be possible for you to circulate that among the planning commission members, like
For information.
for information, but also for feedback? Well, I mean,
that goes against the intent, and there's
Mm.
all the timelines have also been compressed. So
Oh.
I'm not sure I'm going to have time to do that. So I think the intent is not to have somebody. Of course, you wouldn't be voting or recommending on it. You would be perhaps just providing feedback, but that I believe would be against the intent of what the legislation is trying to accomplish. We can ask the attorney's office.
so that puts a much larger import on our zoning ordinance, it sounds like to me. Just in terms of if in order to say, okay, yes, we want to make sure that certain things are a certain distance from the street or certain heights, we really need to, am I?
Maybe answer that in two different ways. One, we simply don't have as many site plans coming through because we're largely built out.
Yeah.
How often do we see a site plan? Probably only a couple times a year. So it's not that important for us to have those construction standards, the document that tells you that the drive aisle has to be 24 feet in width and all the typical things that a jurisdiction that's actually experiencing growth would end up having to experience. And then the other thing is we've already done a lot of planning, comp planning, zoning ordinance, subdivision ordinance. At some point, it needs to be a ministerial approval. If you meet those requirements, it should be a staff approval and not coming before a public body has political influence. It shouldn't necessarily, and I think that's why must have been the intent. Now, mind you, I didn't know about this. Jeremy made me aware of it, and it's hard to go back through the legislation. It just tells you this is the legislation. It doesn't tell you the intent behind it.
Right.
But it's clear that the timelines have been compressed and we're no longer allowed to go through the governing body. So
That's,
it's an administrative approval.
Which two comments on that. One was when we did our 2017 ordinance update, it was proposed that be administrative. And because of something that happened in the past, someone in the community brought up, it should go through planning commission, and planning commission at the time changed that. So it's not unusual for it to be. And then again, Spotswood was a good example. I mean, when it got to the council, we were reviewing the site plan for Spotswood. The project had already been, had already gotten the CUP, and we were supposed to be ranking it on these criteria. And someone on council voted against it because they thought it should be a cemetery all of a sudden. It's like, I mean, that kind of political thing should not happen at that stage in the game. So I understand why that went through, but yeah, I don't think it's uncomfortable to relinquish any kind of control, but I think in this case, we really were just supposed to be going over the guidelines, and you have all the departments reviewing it at this point. I mean, that was always to me kind of the more important thing, is making sure that fire and police saw it so that there was enough room for their equipment to get through.
But we've also done a pretty good job if you think about accessory dwelling units, if you think about the more recent text changes, how much more sort of language we've added, requirements. So all of that should help depending on what type of improvement it is.
yeah, that's exactly what I meant
Right.
by saying that the zoning ordinances are actually going to be more helpful. And yeah, so, okay. Well, thank you. Is there anything
That's it.
else? Okay. Do we have a city council report?
Yeah, just two items. One, the mini warehouses went to council and council tabled it to have a work session and just discussion on mini warehouses overall. And we'll have that work session on Tuesday, July 8th at 5:30. I think it's going to be in here, but if you want to attend in person, just check the city website to make sure. People just want to understand the issue better. And then we're having a meeting tonight, and that's at 7 o'clock at the police station. We canceled the last one because it was on Juneteenth. And then we won't have one next week because it'll be July 3rd when the Freedom Food Festival's going on. So we had one in between. And we'll just have one meeting in July. And that's all I have.
That meeting tonight's on mini warehouses or?
No, that's
Oh.
July 8th. Tonight's a regular council
Oh,
meeting,
got it. Okay.
but it's at the police station.
Great. All right. Well, then I think that fulfills our agenda obligations for discussion. So I think we'll have a motion in a second. Fastest meeting ever.
Move to adjourn. I second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Want to stay here for the rest of the night? And you're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
This is